This will be the best arguments for God tier list video you'll ever see because I am a theist, but I'm a reasonable, smart theist, okay? As they say, the people who say they themselves are smart are actually the smartest people in the world, okay? And I'm gonna rank this from an atheist perspective, okay? If I was an atheist, how persuasive would these arguments be? All that being said, let's get into it. So first, reason. So essentially this argument is natural selection, evolution, etc. is not enough to explain how humans reason the way they do. And to be honest, I think this is a good argument. Although it's not in the best arguments tier because before I would put into the best arguments tier, but honestly, after some experiences debating atheists, I think it's in the good arguments here because it's kind of a deadlock argument because you say, well, evolution, natural selection can't explain this. Say, well, it does. It's like, well, this is kind of non-physical stuff. Then you get to free will, and I don't think free will is on here. No, but I think free will is a better argument than reason. I think free will can combine the good parts of reason and negate the bad parts of the argument for reason. So I know let's call this free will. Free will, best arguments to use, because in order to deny the free will argument, the only way I can see as an atheist is if you deny free will itself, which leads to logical absurdities. I was debating against an evidentialist or empiricist, evidentialist. What was it called? It's a verificationist. That's what it was called. I was debating a verificationist, and that was quite the experience because we got to the point. I didn't realize it was a verificationist until later on in the discussion. At a certain point, he was saying things like murder's not objectively wrong, because we don't really choose to murder people, etc. So you have to get down to these absurdities, at least to the average person, in order to deny the free will argument. I think at least responsibly. Although one can question how responsible it is to deny those type of things. Next, ontological. Should avoid usually. So the ontological argument itself, Alvin Pletica's modal version, is a very strong argument. It's probably honestly the strongest argument for God. The problem is it's not very convincing, especially to an atheist who doesn't understand modal logic. Because what is the first thing an atheist says after the ontological argument is presented? They're like, well, it is logically possible that a unicorn exists, or it's logically possible I live in a world where I'm not an incel, so therefore, I'm not an incel. Something stupid like that. Because the ontological argument is essentially saying the mere possibility of God's existence means God exists. And to people who don't understand modal logic or the ontological argument in general, that seems very confusing. It's like, what? Just because something can exist, it does exist? But then it comes down to modality, necessity, possibility, etc. This is not a video going over the ontological argument, but all you need to know is it's not very convincing from an atheist perspective unless they understand modal logic. I forgot the guy's name, but there's one dude who was converted into theism by the modal ontological argument. But he was a philosopher. He understood what he was talking about. Anyways, Reformed epistemology. This is Calvinistic presuppositionalism. Utterly unconvincing. So it essentially says, we don't need to argue for the existence of God because God exists. And they try saying, well, everyone argues circular, but our circle is better. It's not convincing, okay? You're not going to convert an atheist by saying, well, the Bible is true because it's true. Like, you're not going to convince anyone with that, all right? And plus, Calvinism's wrong. Anyways, teleological argument. So I'm assuming this is a teleological argument referring to cosmological fine-tuning. Good argument. Good argument. I would say it's pretty convincing. I wouldn't say it's one in the best arguments used here because I feel like too many people are dumb and won't really be able to understand it that well. I guess I said if I was an atheist, it goes up here. Okay, but to the average person, the average atheist, I think it goes into good arguments here. I just don't think there's, and I know this sounds arrogant and all egotistical and all, but I really don't think a lot of people are smart enough to understand. And I feel like the response to the argument by saying, well, that's just how it is, without understanding the absurdity of these constants and quantities being the way they are. Then, some people are going to, pull out the Richard Dawkins and Stephen Hawking by saying, oh, well, there's a multiverse and there's an infinite amount of universes, but they don't understand Occam's razor or anything like that. So, It's a good argument. Natural law. Should avoid usually. So, natural law essentially says there's laws governing the universe, and there must have been someone to put in the laws, essentially. And that's a very reductionistic version of the argument. It should avoid usually because I feel like it's very easy to say, well, that's just how it is. I feel like it's too easy to say that as an atheist. Next, trademark. Utterly unconvincing. So the trademark argument is essentially reductionistic again. Because there's a concept of God, God must exist. Now this is a bad version of the ontological argument. Okay? So it's utterly unconvincing for the same reason the ontological argument is unconvincing, but unlike the ontological argument, there's no actual strong feature of the argument. It's essentially what atheists strawman the ontological argument to be. Transcendental argument. So this is a better version of reformed epistemology. I would say good argument, actually. I was going to put it to should avoid usually because it's kind of a presuppositionalist argument, but I think the line of thinking of like the necessary precondition to knowledge is God. I think that kind of line of argumentation can be strong when I think my blue light filter's turned. Okay, draw my mic. Alright, there we go. My blue light filter is turning on. So I think it can end up being a strong argument. Because basically, if you're able to debate an atheist or talk to an atheist, have a discussion, you're able to get all the way down to the core and start questioning, well, how can you even know anything is true? I feel like that could end up being strong. So, transcendental, I'll put that into the good argument here. Next, beauty. To me, beauty and morality are the same tier of argument. And I'll just describe the moral argument. The moral argument essentially says, if objective moral values exist, then God exists. And I think that's a valid argument, but the problem is it's not very convincing. Again, as an atheist, I've always found the moral argument extremely unconvincing from an atheist perspective. I think the free will argument is way better. The problem with the moral argument is it's very easy to say, well, morals just aren't objective. It's just how society is. I feel like it's way too easy to say that. Like, way, way too easy to say that. Although I don't think that's true, if you're debating an atheist, is probably what's going to happen 99% of the time. Maybe if you're... Okay, maybe this can go... probably should have created another... Actually, hold on. Whoops. No, I deleted the... Wait, did I? Bro, what am I doing? Yeah, I did delete the tier. Okay, hold on. Should decent hard for women should Okay, now, and where's beauty? Where did I put beauty? Oh no, morality. Okay, there. Actually, no, not decent. Okay, art. Now you may wonder, like, why am I putting specific tiers for women? Because I think men and women are very different, and I think they're convinced by different things. So if you're asking me what convinces me, more logical things will convince me. However, more emotional charged arguments would be more convincing to women, I believe, because women are more emotional, which is a great thing. That's what makes women women. That's why I don't like these feminists who go around trying to be like men. Alright? Let men be men, let women be women. I think one part of that is different things persuade men and women. So I think these type of arguments would be more convincing to a woman. Next, mystical idealism. Wow. Now, hold on. Okay, I just had to make sure because I had two different things mixed up in my head, but mystical idealism is kind of like the free will argument, to be honest, but it's like an airy-fairy version. Remember, this is not reason, this is the free will argument here. Good argument. I think it's just a worse version of the free will argument, though. Because again, like mystical idealism. That sounds like really airy fairy. Now, consciousness. That also kind of goes. Okay, these are both like the free will argument. Neither of them technically are the free will argument, but both of them. I feel like the free will argument encompasses all of this stuff. So the argument from consciousness says that the fact that we're conscious can. I guess the conscious argument is kind of the free will argument. Okay, let's say. Yeah, let's do that. Consciousness is the free will argument, essentially. And essentially says you have something more than just your brain processes. Because you can't control your brain processes. There's something beyond it, and that allows you to make free decisions. You're conscious. It can't be explained by evolution or natural selection. And everything I said earlier that applied to the free will argument applies there. Now, cosmological. So this would include the kalam and contingency. Best arguments to use, because I really think the question, why is there something rather than nothing, is a very difficult question for atheists. Why is there something rather than nothing? At the end of the day, there's really no answer for it. The best, little wiggle, little thing you can do is try and say, well, the universe is eternal, but all evidence would suggest otherwise. So how do you get nothing into something? Haven't really been able to provide an answer for that. Meanwhile, theists have had an answer for this for literally thousands of years. Very strong answers and strong arguments. Now, degree. So that's just utterly unconvincing. I'm not going to get into it because it's a bunch of nerd stuff, but like the problem with some of the arguments is like the ontological argument. You need to be able to understand so many things in order to understand the argument, which makes it unconvincing. Because you gotta, especially relative to other arguments, like there's much better things you can talk about. Desire. So I mean, to be honest, it's kind of the same as reason, morality, and beauty. But desire kind of has a emotional aspect to it, so I do think it's an okay argument for women. Experience. I think... Okay, hold on. There we go. I think a very strong testimony could be very, very convincing to women. A very, very strong testimony to men isn't that convincing, okay? Unless they already have some kind of social proof, like there's some big influencer decided to convert to Christianity. I don't think personal experience is very strong generally. Guys, the easiest rebuttal is like, well, I mean, a Muslim says the same thing about Muhammad. How can you differentiate that? It's hard to deal with. Unless you start saying, well, there's actual arguments against Islam, but if we're going to make an argument like that, then why didn't you just use one of these other better arguments? Now, Pascal's wager, utterly unconvincing. So, Pascal's wager is really only to motivate someone to think about learning, not actually becoming a theist, because that's basically just ad balcom. If you don't become a theist, you're going to go to hell. Or there's a very good chance you could go to hell, given the odds, the risk to reward. Or excuse me, the risk to reward ratio says you should become a theist because the other side is essentially going to hell. And that's just ad balcom. Very unconvincing to an atheist. Maybe you can get them to do that for... Whoops, drop that on my desk. Knock something over. You can get them to think about becoming learning about theism and atheism and really understanding why they believe what they believe. I think it's strong for that, but for actually convincing someone of God's existence, utterly unconvincing. Now, fine-tuning. Oh, wait. Okay, so this is actually biological. This is biological fine-tuning. Like, how can... Like, humans, why are humans so different, etc. It's kind of that type of stuff. Should avoid usually. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Cosmological fine-tuning. That's a good argument. Now, this is referring to what I was talking about earlier. This should be avoided usually because all these Richard Dawkins quotes are going to say, well, that has been completely explained by evolution. Although I don't really think that's true. I think the teleological argument is still strong when it comes to biology, but still, I mean, people are going to... It's not very convincing to an atheist at this point, unfortunately. Love. I think that's self-explanatory. I already explained why these type of arguments are good for a woman. Miracles. Good argument, actually. I think Jesus' resurrection has a very strong argument for it historically. But again, I feel like if you don't already believe in God, it's very easy to wiggle out of Jesus' resurrection. I feel like if you're trying to use Jesus' resurrection to convince someone of God's existence, you're kind of wasting it. Because it becomes far weaker when the person doesn't already believe in God or believe strongly in the possibility of God's existence. Okay, so it's a good argument, but I feel like it could be used in different situations and be more productive. Now, those are the arguments. I've made some material on some of these arguments, going over why they're valid and the objections, etc. If you want to see those, you can join the Discord, link in the description. Build back Christian men. Alright, most Christian men don't even know about anything about any of these arguments. It's quite a sad thing. Looking to change that. If you want to join the movement, link in the description to the Discord. Subscribe for more amazing videos. Follow me on Instagram, like all my posts. Go to my playlist in the description. You can get a bunch of life-changing videos in there. Those are my call to actions. See you next video.